Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Kari's Confessions, a nonprofit exec tells all. I'm Kari Anderson, your host and principal with Incite Consulting. My podcast explores the tools and strategies that help nonprofit leaders grow their impact and build resilient organizations. As always, I'm here to share some hard-earned lessons and honest truths from life inside the nonprofit world. For those of you who don't know me yet, I spent 25 plus years in the nonprofit sector in leadership roles with 7 organizations. Now I provide coaching and consulting services to ensure that nonprofits, like yours, have the structure, systems, and practices to do your best work. Wherever I go, I continue to hear that nonprofit execs need a space to gather, to receive tools, feedback, and advice that encourages them to stay the course. It doesn't matter if you're in a village of 182 or a metropolis of millions, nonprofit work is both gratifying and lonely. I'm here to make sure that you have a chance to breathe, laugh, smirk, and hopefully get excited again about the important work that you do. So if you work in a nonprofit, you've probably lived this moment. You're sitting across from someone, a donor, a partner, board director, and you're trying to explain your work. And it comes out like this. Here's what we do. Here's the need. Here's our program. Here's the budget gap. Would you consider a gift? And you can feel it, even as you're saying it. It sounds flat. It sounds transactional, like you're squeezing something deeply human into a format that doesn't quite fit. And here's the thing. It's not that any of that is wrong. It's just incomplete. Because pitching asks people to agree with you. Storytelling asks people to join you. And if you're trying to grow a movement, if you're trying to build something that lasts, you don't need more people nodding politely. You need people who feel something, who see themselves in it, who step forward. Let me ground us for a second. I've seen something over and over again. Brilliant, mission-driven leaders getting stuck in what I call pitch mode, especially when things feel messy, chaotic, urgent. And boy, hasn't that been the last 5 years. Let's be honest. We know that nonprofit work is messy. We're messy, messy, messy. It doesn't mean we're doing it wrong. There's not a clean playbook. We inherit systems that grew organically. You're probably managing legacy decisions that you didn't make. You're balancing board dynamics, staffing realities, donor expectations, and community needs all at the same time. And funding cycles, they do not care about your strategic plan. So what happens? You default to survival mode. And survival language, I sure did. Transactional language, pitch language, even though you know better. Here's the truth I want you to hear clearly. I've mentioned this before, nonprofit is a tax status. It's not a business model. If you're trying to run your organization on passion and good intentions alone, you're not alone. But you deserve better than chaos. Your mission deserves better than chaos. A healthy, sustainable organization is built. It is not wished into existence. And part of what builds it, this is what I'm getting to, is a story strong enough to hold the complexity of your work without turning it into a desperate plea. So here's some thoughts from my side of the house as to why pitching keeps you small, even when your organization and your mission is big. So let's talk about what pitching actually does. Even with the best intentions, it tends to do 3 things. First, it centers your organization. Your programs become the main character. Your budget becomes the plot, and your internal needs become the urgency. But donors and community members, they're left on the outside looking in. So second, pitching pushes for a decision before trust is built. Will you give? That question comes too early. And when it comes too early, people either say no or they say yes once and quietly disappear. One of my old bosses used to call that the one and done transactional gift. So third, what does pitching do? It trains your team to chase transactions instead of relationships. You start measuring success by how many asks you made instead of asking, how many relationships did we deepen? How much trust did we build? Now, if you're thinking, but we have to raise money. Yes, you do. But you don't have to do it in a way that makes you feel like you are constantly auditioning for your own survival. Sustainable fundraising isn't a personality trait. It's built through systems and relationships. And storytelling is one of the most powerful systems that you can build at your organization because it aligns your message, it strengthens trust, and it creates momentum people actually want to be a part of. Storytelling isn't marketing fluff, contrary to what one board director says. It is leadership. When nonprofits say we need help with messaging, what they often mean is we're doing important work and we can't explain it in a way that makes people care fast enough. Story fixes that, but it's not because it's clever. Story works because it gives structure to complexity. It helps people make sense of what you do without oversimplifying it. A strong nonprofit story does a few critical things. It names the problem in human terms. It shows what change actually looks like. It explains why you and why now. And it invites people in a way that feels dignified, not desperate. But here's the part about storytelling that matters most. Story aligns your people because people, not plans, drive success. Your board, your staff, your donors, your volunteers. If your story is unclear, even people who care deeply will start pulling in different directions. A clear story becomes your center of gravity. So, in my opinion, there are 3 stories that every nonprofit needs. If you actually want storytelling to work, you need more than a polished About Us page on your website or a case for support in a digital format. You need 3 core stories, and your team needs to know them, every single team member. So the first story is the why we exist story. This is your identity, not your founding date, not your list of programs. This is the moment that you can point to say, this is what we could no longer ignore. It answers questions like, what problem are we responding to? What do we believe is possible that others have accepted as normal? What values guide us when things get complicated? If your board can't tell this story consistently, you will feel it everywhere in fundraising, in strategy, in morale. So the second story I think is critical for every nonprofit is this one, the what change looks like story. This is your impact. Most nonprofits describe activity. Storytelling describes transformation because donors don't fall in love with outputs. They fall in love with outcomes. They want to know who is different because you showed up, what changed in their life, their future. Yes, metrics matter and we better darn well track them, but don't make the spreadsheet the hero. Make the person the hero. Now, the third story I think is most impactful, the join us story. This is your invitation. And this is where most organizations struggle because they jump straight to, we need 50 grand. But a movement invitation sounds different. It says, here's what's possible. Here's what it takes. Here's how you can make a difference. Here's the role you can play. When this story is clear, fundraising stops feeling random. It becomes a natural next step. A simple storytelling framework that actually works is a missing component that I didn't have for years. So you might be thinking, well, Kari, this all sounds great, but we don't have time to craft perfect stories. Good news, you don't need perfect. You need simple and repeatable. So here's a framework, again, that I wish I had when I was in the field that your team can actually use right now. So first, the tension. What's happening that shouldn't be happening? Next, the stakes. What happens if nothing changes? Now, the turning point. What are we doing differently? The proof. What results are we seeing? The invitation. What can someone do next? That's it. So I'll repeat those 5 pieces again. The tension, the stakes, the turning point, the proof, the invitation. So that's all it is. This works in a donor meeting, in a board update, in a grant proposal. And when your whole team uses it, you create consistency without scripting people. That consistency, it's a growth accelerator. Storytelling strengthens strategy. It doesn't replace it. So let's be clear. Storytelling is not a substitute for strategy. If you're thinking we don't need prettier words, we need a plan, I agree. In the work that I do, I focus on helping organizations build internally via strategic planning, succession planning, revenue development, people systems, because without those, growth doesn't last. But here's the thing. Storytelling makes all of those work better. In strategic planning, story gives direction. It helps you decide what to prioritize and what to stop doing. In succession planning, story protects continuity, so leadership transitions don't derail your mission. In revenue development, story becomes the engine. Because systems alone don't inspire people, meaning does. People don't stay engaged because you send a receipt. They stay because they feel like they're part of something that matters. Your internal systems will either support your story or sabotage it. This is the part that many organizations miss. You can have the most compelling story in the world, but if your board is disengaged, your staff burned out, and accountability is unclear, people will fill that instability, even if they can't name it. That's why internal culture matters so much. The hard conversations, the real alignment, the clarity around expectations. Because a movement is built by people who trust each other enough to do hard work together. So I always ask my clients to do a quick gut check. If you want to know where you stand, ask yourself, do we talk more about programs than people? Do donors only hear from us when we need something? Can our board explain our impact without a script? Is our message consistent across the organization? Are we relying on systems or heroics? If any of these questions hit a little too close, that's not failure. It's baseline clarity for you. And clarity is where change begins. So you don't have to start storytelling work alone. One of the best parts of this sector is that you don't have to figure it out all by yourself. There are incredible people who specialize in fundraising, communications, operations, events, strategy, and the strongest organizations know when to bring in support. But before you jump into tactics, pause. Get your foundation right, your strategy, your revenue plan, your people systems, your story. Because when those align, fundraising stops feeling like begging. Board service stops feeling like herding cats. Staff stops carrying everything alone. And your community starts moving with you. So I'm going to end today with a challenge. For the next 2 weeks, stop pitching. Just stop. Instead, tell one true story each week. A story about a person, a turning point, a quiet win, a moment that reminded you why you and why your organization exists. Share it in a meeting, send it in an email, tell it to a donor, and then watch what happens. People lean in when they feel connected. They step up when they understand the stakes. They give. They volunteer. They advocate. They bring others with them. That's how movements grow. If you're feeling stuck, if your organization is in the middle of a mess, trying to untangle strategy, revenue, or people dynamics, that's the work I love. Because you didn't start this just to get by. You started it to make a difference. And your story, when it's clear and supported, can carry that difference further than any pitch ever could. So thanks for joining me today for Kari's Confessions, a nonprofit exec tells all. If you found this episode helpful, share it with a colleague or board member. Make sure to follow me on your favorite streaming platforms, and for additional resources and tools, follow me on LinkedIn. You can also check out my website at inciteconsultinggroup.com. Until next time, have a great week.